what happened in Israel recently, there were two military bases that were raided by far-right fanatics, Jewish extremists. They came in by the hundreds and they raided two military bases slash detention centers. So what happened was this. It's very, very simple, guys. A Palestinian man was sodomized by Israeli soldiers. I don't know exactly how they sodomized him, but from what I have read, from medical details that have been reported to Haaretz, his anus was horrendously damaged. His lungs were damaged, but the fact that his anus was damaged tells us that there was sodomizing that was taking place. These officers who did this, these soldiers, reservists, I should say, who did this crime, are sodomizers. So these soldiers, they were based in a base called Sde Timan, which is near the Negev, which is closer to Gaza. And these police officers, they went into the base to arrest the reservists who sodomized this man, or who were involved in sodomizing this man. And acrimonious discussion ensued. A confrontation broke out and commenced. And then before you know it, a whole mob of radicals raid the base to try to prevent the reservists from being arrested. Well, the reservists got arrested. They were taken over to another base called Beit Lid. And while they were in Beit Lid, the fanatics went there. They went to Beit Lid and they raided the base. So chaos and violence ensued in both cases. Some of the rioters, of the raiders, were dressed in military uniform and were armed. They were armed with military weapons. So they were. It's really a indication of a rift in Israeli society. And the reason why those rioters were there was to protect reservists from prosecution for sodomizing a Palestinian man. Now, there was a fanatic. Now, let me show you guys this this video here, because you think, well, that's pretty horrendous, right? What these fanatics are saying is that you can do whatever you want to someone as long as that person is a Palestinian prisoner. That's the message they're conveying, that you can be a sodomizer as long as your victim is a Palestinian. Now, if I hear that a group of police officers arrested a man and then they gang raped him or sodomized him, I would be in favor of those officers being prosecuted. I would be in favor of those officers being arrested, prosecuted, and punished. The last thing I would be thinking about is starting a riot to defend them. That's the last thing I'd be thinking about. I would be thinking about justice. Because sodomizing a man is a crime. It's a heinous, grave crime. And if you're Jewish, if you're religious and you're Jewish, you know in the Bible it's against this sort of thing. It's against it. And they don't care. That's the thing. They don't give a damn, these people. They believe that they have a right to sodomize people as long as those people are Palestinian or are perceived to be some kind of enemy of the nation. Now, what does this tell us? It tells us that Israel is becoming Sodom. Israel is becoming Sodom. That's what that means. They claim to be people who follow the Bible, but they follow the Old Testament. They claim to be people who follow God's law. Well, God would not be in favor for this. And they don't care. That's the thing. They're zealots. They're zealots for their own law, which is despotism and cruelty and sadism. That's the bottom line. While they pretend to be zealots for God's law, they're not. They're not in favor for God's law. And they're always talking about building a temple. They want to. That's the thing. That's part of their. That's at the center of their ideology. Is rebuilding the temple, because The temple was at the center of Judaism. Jesus came over and said, listen, this whole thing's going down, so relax. They killed Jesus because he said that. And they continued to revere the temple. Well, they started a war with the Romans. They revolted against Roman rule. And then they started killing each other. And why were the Jews killing each other? They were fighting over who was going to control the temple. That was at the center of the Judean civil war. And talk to any historian about this, they will tell you that there indeed was a civil war in the midst of the Roman Judean revolt. And they were fighting and killing each other over power over the city of Jerusalem, but also power over the temple. Who was going to control the temple? So on one side you had the Zealots, and on the other side you had Sadducees/Pharisees. And the Zealots, they believed that the other side wasn't zealot enough, right? They're not as extreme as we are. We're the real deal because we're the most extreme people. What happened, and I've talked about this many times, but I'll continue to talk about this because it's very relevant, very pertinent. What happened eventually was they took over Jerusalem. The Zealots did. They came over, they slaughtered the other Jews, and they took power. They became, at one point, they were the dominant sect. Now, what happened when they took over? Josephus tells us that they began to indulge in homosexuality. And I'm going to read it to you. I'm going to read to you guys an excerpt of Josephus' history today just to give you guys what Josephus actually said as opposed to just me giving you a summation of what Josephus said. That way you can really sink your teeth into the information. But Josephus tells us that they made Jerusalem into a brothel. I said a brothhouse, a whorehouse, brothel. Well, not really a whorehouse, but it was more of a bathhouse in San Francisco. Let's put it that way. And Josephus tells us that men were beginning to put on women's dresses. Remind you of something? And he tells us that they would be dressed up as women, but they would hold swords. So while they were dressed up as women, he said that they would actually murder people. So they were killing people while wearing dresses. This was Silence of the Lambs, Buffalo Bill type stuff. They became Sodom. Now, what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah? It tells us this in Genesis chapter 19. What happened in Sodom and Gomorrah? It's pretty crazy what happened. 3 men visited Abraham. Okay. Abraham bows down. Why? Because one of them was God. And Abraham starts talking to one of the 3 men, and this man is referred to as God. This is in Genesis 18. And then the 3 men began to walk away, and they said, listen, we have a mission. We're going to go destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. It's like something out of a movie. 3 men randomly pop up in the middle of the desert talking to some caravan owner named Abraham, and they say, hello, Abraham. Who are you? Sit down, Abraham. Let's have some dinner. We're going to go destroy this most wicked city. Most wicked city. So the 3 men eventually go to Sodom, and it says that the Lord began to rain down fire from the Lord. How does God rain down fire from God? Well, this is God the Son raining down fire from God the Father in heaven. Very fascinating. It says the Lord on earth rained down fire from the Lord in heaven. Pretty fascinating stuff. You can see right there the multi-person of God, of the Godhead, right there in the Old Testament. But it tells us that at first 2 angels came to Sodom. Why? Because, well, when the 3 men began to walk away, Abraham started talking to one of them. So as he's talking with one of the men, who was God, the other 2 go to Sodom and Gomorrah, and it describes these 2 men as being angels. And it says that they came to Sodom and Gomorrah, and they met with Lot, who was the nephew of Abraham, and they told Lot, you got to get the hell out of here because we're about to nuke the place. But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old. So you had some young Sodomites, and then you had those old Berkeleyite 1960s style Sodomites. You had the old gay dudes. You know, you ever been to the Bay Area? You ever go to San Francisco? It's like, you know, the gayest place in the world, supposedly. You always see these old guys walking around. Yeah, they're pretty creepy. Some old-ass weirdos over there in Sodom and Gomorrah, circa, 3000 BC. So it says here, the men of Sodom, not the women, the men of Sodom. That's a very telling distinction. It's a very telling detail. Because people say, well, the reason why Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed because of the lack of hospitality. It had nothing to do with homosexuality. But it says all the men of Sodom. It doesn't say the women of Sodom came. And they brought their lack of hospitality with them. No, it says, and the dudes of Sodom. The old geezers, the old perverts, and the young perverts all came. All them bastards came. So it says here, I love this music. Oh God, it's so good. Here we go. So it says here that all the perverts of Sodom, all the perverted dudes of Sodom, all the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man. So now it's being very, very emphatic here. It's emphasizing how all the men of Sodom came. Both young and old, all the people to the last man surrounded the house. And they called to Lot, where are the men? They didn't say, where are the chicks? They didn't say, hey Lot, you bring any hot chicks with you? No. They said, where are the men? And you could totally hear this. When you read this verse, you could totally hear this in one of those voices that you hear on HGTV. You know, those real estate shows you see on television. They have an apartment in New York. You know, Sally and Adam are looking for an apartment in New York City. Their budget is $5 million. And then they have some real estate agent who comes over. Well, Sally and Adam are coming over. They're looking for an apartment. Their budget is $5 million. I think I can find something better than that. I think I can find them $3 million. I think I can find that. You read this verse in Sodom. You read this verse in the scriptures, and it says, and the whole mob of men came to Lot's house, and they said, where are the men? Hey, where are the men? Where are the men, Lot? These freaks, where are the men? Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may rape them. Now, most English translations render it as know them, but in this vernacular of the English language, to know is to know someone sexually. So bring the men out that we may rape them. That's what they're asking. In this context, that's what that means, right? To rape them. They want to sodomize the men. They want to have the right to sodomize men. That's what's happening here. But I can guarantee you that they had a policy of raping strangers. Because think about it. They don't know these guys are angels. They saw them as two dudes. So two dudes they see two dudes. They've never seen them before. They see two dudes walk into Sodom and they say, oh, where are they? We got to rape them. This tells me that there was a system in place here. It was systematic rape. Systematic homosexuality. That's what it is. Tel Aviv is gayer than San Francisco. I agree. That's true. That's why I said supposedly. Theo, did you hear about this story about ancient India and nuclear explosions depiction? No, I did not. I think it's Vedic. No, I did not. Can you send me a link there, please? Thank you. So they said, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may know them. It sounds like systematic policy. Lot went out to the men at the entrance, shut the door after him, and said, I beg you, do not act so wickedly. Behold. So he said, I have 2 daughters, and et cetera, et cetera. But they said, stand back! And they said, this fellow came to sojourn and has become the judge. Now, you see, this is why I say this was a part of policy. Rape and homosexuality was part of policy in Sodom and Gomorrah. Because look at what they tell Lot. I'll read to you guys again. In fact, I'll just show you the verse here. Hold on. Let's just look at the verse together here. See, look what it says here. They said to Lot, stand back. And they said, this fellow, Lot, came to sojourn, meaning he is not a native of Sodom. He moved here recently. This fellow came to sojourn, and he has become the judge. In other words, you're an outsider. You're not from here, right? You're not from a part of this land. You don't know how things work here. And you are already acting like you're a judge. You're already acting like you're an official who can dictate to us what we can and cannot do. You don't understand how it works over here, Lot. So you, Lot, are an outsider. You ain't from around here, are you, boy? And so they said, now we will deal worse with you than with them. So they're telling Lot, we're going to rape these two dudes, but when we're done with them, we're going to act worse with you. And God knows, only Lord knows what that meant. But it was something atrocious that they were planning for Lot. So it says here, then they pressed hard against the man Lot and drew near to break down the door. But the men reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck with blindness the men who were at the entrance of the house, both small and great, so that they wore themselves out, groping for the floor. Groping for the door. Sorry, I said the floor. Now, this is a very interesting verse. It says here, and they struck with blindness the men who were at the entrance of the house, both small and great. Now, what does that mean, both small and great? Like midgets and tall dudes? No. It means here, all the men were at Lot's house, both those who were just regular people and those who were of great prestige and position. So what this means is that the policy of homosexuality was so entrenched in the society that even the highest people of Sodom were at Lot's house to make sure that the policy was enacted. That's how deep this went. This was a very evil society. And when you factor in all these details in the verses that I think a lot of people just skip over or just don't really emphasize on, you really, really can see how wicked these cities were, the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. So that's what Lot was dealing with. That's what God destroyed. So that's now fast forward to the year 2024. It's here in Israel, and you hear a story about Israeli soldiers sodomizing a man. Now, the law would say, well, the sodomizers should be prosecuted, right? They should be arrested, investigated, prosecuted, and if they're found guilty, they should be punished. A mob of fanatics comes along, and they don't give a damn. They're saying, no, you're not going to do that. Now, let me show you guys a video here that really bespeaks what I'm talking about here. There is a video you can see, and I played this video before in one of my prior videos, but I'll play it for you guys again.
אני לא יודע אם יודעים, אבל יש אירוע כרגע בשדה תימן, שמשטרה צבאית הגיעו לעצור חיילים ששמרו על מחבלי נוח'בה. והחיילים בשדה תימן, מתקן מעצר של מחבלי נוח'בה, ומשטרה צבאית שם הגיעה לעצור כמה לוחמים שם, שכנראה בגלל איזה שהם טענות של יחס למחבלי נוח'בה.
Some allegations, he's talking about sodomizing a man. All right, just for context, okay?
ויש שם אירוע של התבצרות וכולי. הטרלול שהמדינה שלנו נכנסת אליו סביב הסיפור הזה.
The insanity that our country is having around this story is crazy. So if you're outraged that a man is sodomized by the soldiers who have been touted as the most moral army in the world, yeah, you should be outraged by that. By the way, in the Old Testament, in the book of Judges, there's a story of how a group of Israelites raped a woman to death, and it started a whole war. So, yeah, people should be outraged over this.
הוא מטורף וצריך להפסיק אותו, ואני חושב שצריך פה לתת דוגמה אישית, ואני אומר עכשיו, ואני קורא לחברי הקואליציה לעשות כמוני, אני קם ואני יוצא מפה.
I'm getting up and leaving now. I love when people threaten to leave. If someone threatens to leave, I just say, go ahead. Feel free. No one's stopping you. No one's stopping you guys.
ואני לא הולך להצביע יותר על שום דבר.
I'm not going to vote on anything. So he's using his position to coerce people.
הסיפור הזה והטרלול
Anyway, until this story and this insanity,
הזה, שיש מי
that
שבפרקליטות
there is someone in the prosecutor's office who thinks
חושב שאפשר לבוא
that it is possible to come and arrest soldiers for things they are doing to terrorists. Things that they are doing, translation, sodomizing a man. So in this guy's sick head, you can sodomize a man as long as he is a perceived terrorist. Now, I looked into this to see, was this guy a terrorist, blah, blah, blah. I haven't really seen any details about who the victim's identity, or, what the victim's identity is, or who he is.
לעצור חיילים על דברים שעושים למחבלי נוח'בה לא נגמר. אוקיי?
And I'm really asking, and I think my coalition friends will do well if they do the same as I do.
אני מאוד מבקש, ואני חושב שחבריי בקואליציה טוב יעשו אם יעשו כמוני. אנחנו לא יכולים להמשיך
We cannot continue as usual, so we have to allow raping Palestinians. I mean, that's just the bottom line. That's what he's saying. We have to be a wonderful Jewish state where we can practice our wonderful laws and show the radiancy of Jewish identity. We must allow rape. That's what this guy's saying. So this guy asks him to insert a stick in a person's rectum. Is that legitimate? I mean, it's a very straightforward question. Shut up. Shut your mouth. How dare you protest against male-on-male rape? How dare you? This is Israel. Don't you know our customs here? Huh. Doesn't that remind us of something? Genesis chapter 19. Lot says to the mob of perverts in Sodom, do not do such a wicked thing, raping a man. And what do they tell Lot? Stand back. You come here as an outsider and you put yourself a judge over us? How dare you? Now, the man who asks the question in this video, who says to insert a stick in a person's rectum, is that legitimate? The man asking the question, by the way, is an Arab politician named Ahmed Tibi. So Ahmed Tibi is an Arab Israeli, and to the fanatics, the Arabs, they're not really the purest Israeli. They're not Jewish. They're outsiders. They're foreigners in their wacky eyeballs. They're foreigners. So this Arab man, amazingly, how come there's not a Jewish guy in this room rising up and saying, hey, this is wrong? No, it's an Arab dude doing it. So this Arab politician gets up, Ahmed Tibi, and he says, this is not good. This ain't right. And in the mind of the fanatic, oh, you're an outsider. Who the hell are you to tell us anything? But he tells this man, shut up. Shut your mouth, Arab. How dare you? How dare you question us? Remind us of Genesis 19. Lot tells them, do not do such a wicked thing. What do they tell Lot? Stand back, you foreigner. Stand back, you foreigner. You don't know our civilized gay ways. Shut up. Yes. Sodomizing a man is legitimate if he is a nukhba, which is like another way of saying nukhba is the Hamas commando unit. So he's saying if he's a Hamas fighter, yeah, raping him is okay. Everything is legitimate. Everything. Cannibalism. You could, eat him alive. Anything is legitimate. Anything. Everything, including sodomizing. That's right. Sodomizing a man is completely legitimate. So Israel is becoming Sodom and Gomorrah. That's what's happening. Now you could say, well, Ted, in all fairness, he's saying that as long as the guy, the victim, is a terrorist, then it's okay. He's not saying rape everybody. Now, you could even put a caveat to that and say, I'm not saying that rape is good, but all I'm saying is to put things in proper context and to actually put the full argument here, and that is, if the man is a terrorist, then blah. Well, hold on. And so the Arab guys, that's all I wanted to know. You've exposed yourself. Do you know what these people did? Okay. So the Arab guy says, listen, there are things you don't do, which is true.
יש דברים שלא עושים.
There are things you don't do. I completely agree. There's things you just don't do. Now, let me show you guys a video here. So this guy says that all Palestinians are terrorists. Funny thing is, this guy is very popular. I don't know his name, but he's an Iranian Jew. I forgot his name. He's an Iranian Jew. And he says that they're all terrorists. So if they're all terrorists, right, and a lot of people agree with this guy. That's the thing. So if they're all terrorists, then you can rape all Palestinians. Because the guy said, against a terrorist, anything is permissible. Now, if you go to some Israeli right-winger and say, look what this guy is saying, what's he going to tell you? Is he going to say, yeah, that guy's a creep? More than likely, he's going to say, well, no, he's saying terrorist. That's what all these people say. No, he's saying terrorist. Well, then let's cross-reference him with what this guy has to say, which is they're all terrorists. All Palestinians are terrorists. So if all Palestinians are terrorists, that means you can kill and rape all of them. That's what that means. Let's give this a listen.
מה זה אומר לפגוע באוכלוסייה?
אין חפים מפשע. זה בדיוק שאתה אומר אוכלוסייה.
He says there are no civilians.
אוכלוסייה. יש 2.5 מיליון.
There are 2.5 million terrorists. So he's saying every person in Gaza is a terrorist.
טרוריסטים. ולכן אין משמעות להקש בגג. עושים הקש בגג כדי שחף מפשע יצא. ברגע שבעזה אין חף מפשע, אז אין טעם להקש בגג.
They are no innocents. So when they justify raping a man by saying, well, he's a terrorist, well, this guy says they're all terrorists. And the thing about right-wingers is that, and you can say the same thing about lefties, but the thing about right-wingers that really bothers me is that when you show them a guy that they really like saying something atrocious, they will always defend that person. I've never seen a righty in any movement, in any country, come out and say, that's wrong. I've seen this with American righties. I've seen this with Israeli righties. They never come out and say, that's wrong. I don't stand for that. They will always come out and either downplay what has been said or they will defend it. But I've never seen them come out and condemn. Never. Another example of this, another example of this, I'm showing you one right now, but another example of this was Milo Yiannopoulos. Very famous. He was very famous in the right wing. He was revered by America's right wing. And when Milo Yiannopoulos came out and defended molesting a male youth, when he defended the action of molesting a male youth, he defended pederasty, to be specific. Alex Jones came out and said, we have to help Milo. Many publications, right-wing publications, came out and acted as if Milo was still a great guy. Front Page Magazine defended Milo. And even after defending pederasty, his book was a New York Times bestseller. It was very disturbing to see that, but that's an example of what I'm talking about. That's an example of the exact bullshit that I'm referring to. That bullshit. And Franklin Graham Ministries was hanging out with Milo. It's sickening. It's really sickening. But that's exactly what I'm talking about. Let's listen to more of this freak. Everyone's a terrorist. So, I mean, if sodomizing a guy is okay, if he's a terrorist, then you can sodomize everyone in Gaza.
אז מה זה אומר, להרוג את
So
כולם?
does that mean kill everyone?
וזה תפיסה.
And that's an idea. Yeah, genocide is totally on the table at this point. And what does it mean?
עכשיו, מה זה אומר? יש
There is
משהו
something defined in war.
מוגדר בשעת מלחמה שנקרא שעת חסד. זה אומר, חשוב מאוד, 10 שעות
It
הראשונות
happens in the first 10 hours of the war and after the first attack.
של המלחמה, מה אתה עושה? זוועות והכל עשו, היינו צריכים להוריד
We need to take down 50,000 Gazans.
50,000 עזתים. ואת זה
I'm
אני לא
not saying that here in Channel 14.
אומר פה ב-14, גם אמרתי ב-11, וגם אמרתי ב-12, וגם אמרתי בכל במה אפשרית אמרתי, לא מכיוון שעכשיו פה 14 אני אומר את זה, בכל במה
איך להרוג 50,000?
מטיסים מטוסים, 4 גלים, משטחים.
Okay, here's some more of this rhetoric. This guy says I'm for war crimes.
חס וחלילה, פשע מלחמה זה אני, אתה רגל על הגב. פשע מלחמה זה אני מודה.
No, hold on. Sorry.
פשע מלחמה זה אני, אתה רגל על הגב. פשע מלחמה זה אני מודה, אני אגיד את זה פה, לא אכפת לי שירדו עליי, אוספים פה חומרים. אני לא נרדם טוב בלי שאני רואה בתים קורסים בעזה. מה אני אעשה? עוד בתים, עוד מגדלים, שלא יהיה להם לאן לחזור. אגב, בתקופת התנ"ך גם היו זורים את האדמה במלח. הם צריכים לזכור, הם עמלק. הם צריכים לזכור את זה להרבה מאוד זמן. אי אפשר להגיע לאיזה הסדר מיד. סליחה, זה רק אני. זה פשע מלחמה.
I mean, you can find many more examples of this, but I won't be redundant about it. But the fact is that they believe that it's legitimate not only to kill people for being Palestinian, but to rape them. And that was seen in the raiding of Sde Timon and Beit Lead, when they arrested 10 officers for sodomizing a Palestinian man. An entire mob of people came to defend those officers, just like an entire mob of people came to Lot to defend male-on-male rape. And it reminds me of that song from System of a Down called, I think it was called Holy Mountain. And in the song, they're talking about what the Ottomans did to the Armenians in the Armenian genocide. And what do they say in the song? What do they say? Murderer! Sodomizer! That's what this is. Back to the river, da-da-da-da! Sodomizer! Yep. That's right. That's what this is. That's what you're dealing with here. And there's a video that you can see from one of the raids in which you see a mob of fanatics pounding the door of one of the prisons, demanding the release. They are hitting the door and the wall in their defense of rape. Male-on-male rape, just like the men of Sodom. Let's listen to this or watch this. Keep hitting Chrome. So used to hitting Chrome. It's becoming Sodom. That's what it's becoming. I'm going to read to you guys an excerpt from Josephus, just to give you guys the details of what Josephus talked about when he described Jerusalem becoming a gay bathhouse. So this is in Josephus's War of the Jews book. If you want to actually look at the reference, if you want to be that pedantic, this is from book 4, chapter 9. And it says here, this is after the zealots overrun the city with blood, the city of Jerusalem. And it says here, they also devoured what spoils they had taken, together with their blood, and indulged themselves. Look what it says here, in feminine wantonness. Feminine wantonness, which wanton means cruel. One of those old English words that a lot of people don't use anymore. Feminine wantonness. Well, if you look at the New Testament, it speaks of men who are feminine. And when it speaks of men who are feminine, it's referring to them as being perverts, sodomites. And it says here, they indulged themselves in feminine wantonness without any disturbance till they were satiated therewith. while they decked their hair. These are men. They decked their hair and put on women's garments. This is the first trans movement. This is the beginning of the LGBT. They put on women's garments and were besmeared over with ointments. So they put on makeup. They were trans. It was a big drag show. And these were done by zealots, by the way. This was not done by Jews who were moderates, who said, hey, let's have peace with the Romans. No, they killed those ones. These were the people who called themselves zealots. They wanted to show that they were the most zealous for the law. And here they were being sodomites, sodomizers. And that they might appear very comely, they had paints under their eyes, makeup, and initiated not only the ornaments, but also imitated not only the ornaments, but also the lust of women, and were guilty of such intolerable uncleanness, and they invented unlawful pleasures of that sort, and thus did they roll themselves up and down the city as in a brothel house, and defiled it entirely with their impure actions. Nay, while their faces looked like the faces of women, they killed with their right hands. So they were violent sodomites. They were Buffalo Bill. They were like these serial killers you read about. And when their gait was effeminate, they walked like women. They presently attacked men and became warriors, and drew their swords from under their finely dyed cloaks, and ran everybody through whom they alighted upon. And that was the end result of people rejecting their Messiah. And there's many details you could read in Josephus' history. I recommend that everyone read that book, Josephus' history of the war between the Romans and the Jews. It's a very, very good book, very informative. It shows you it's the after story, right? You have the story of Jesus, and then you say, what's the after story? Well, you could say it's the story of the disciples, and you would be right. But what's the after story of the other guys, the ones who did the crucifying, the ones who did the rejection, the ones who said Matsaleb, which means crucify him, the ones who chose Barabbas over their Messiah, the ones who cheered and clapped at the crucifixion of Christ, who mocked Christ, who scoffed at Christ. What was the after story? What's the sequel of that story? What's the sequel of their lives? The sequel is in Josephus. That's what happened.